this edition of Featured Artist. And with us today is Kristin Anderson, fused glass artist and current president of the board of directors at the Florence Regional Arts Alliance. Kristin, it seems like we caught up with you at the gallery today.
Yes, you did. I'm sitting here at FRA today.
Excellent. And we're going to chat about the Art Center in a little bit. But first, how did you actually come to be in Florence?
So my husband and I were looking for a place to retire, and we decided to just do a driving trip north. We lived in the Bay Area, California. And so we stopped in every town along 101. Each town had its own little vibe.
Right. And there's a lot of them too.
Exactly. Trying to figure out if it worked for us. We got to Florence and fell in love with the place. The library was awesome, Chamber of Commerce. There was a woman there who helped us find a place to stay, place to eat.
Wow.
You know, just very nice people. Food was great. All the restaurants were great. So we decided then and there that this was the place.
Awesome. Now, so for someone who is so involved as you are in the creation and the promotion of art, well, you mentioned to me earlier, you're almost kind of like the accidental artist in a way. How did you actually turn that corner to creativity, to becoming a fused glass artist?
Yeah, so my background is engineering. I never thought I had a single ounce of artistic talent in me at all. And people always say you're either right brain or left brain. But I worked in a startup, and the CEO of the startup firmly believed that there was actually a connection. And he believed that engineers make really good musicians. Some of us weren't necessarily at this company into the music, and we started doing other things. I started making jewelry, and then saw a class on making fused glass components for jewelry, took the class, fell absolutely in love with fused glass, although I prefer the big things. So went back for like 3 more classes from this place. And then so it was a hobby. I would get home at night, I would start something and just kind of keep creating as the week went on.
Yeah.
But once I retired, then I was able to spend a lot more time doing it. And I call it my addiction because I just love it.
So do you think do you think people come to their artwork in more of a serendipitous sort of manner, or do you think maybe it's something they grew up with? Maybe it's a little bit of both. What do you think about that?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think some people that grow up in a household where there's a lot of artistic stuff going on and they're kind of raised with it, then I think they know that that's what they want to do. And yet I think that there's a lot of us who just come upon it serendipitous, where we never knew that we had anything, but we find all of a sudden that one little thing catches our attention. We give it a try, and we fall in love with it.
So I guess it's safe to say that's really when creativity sort of struck.
For me, yes.
Yeah. And so that's how you actually settled on it, because did you look at any other art forms before you actually kind of got into creating fused glass?
The only other thing I tried the very first thing I tried was actually blown glass. I convinced my husband to go take a class with me because it was about an hour away. So we went and took this class, and it was wonderful, but it was very heavy. I'm petite. I could not really hold the punty all that well. And it was a hobby that you have to do at someplace else with other people. And since I worked, 14 hours a day, I just couldn't see making that happen regularly. I wanted something that I could do at home at night, not have to go anywhere. And so it worked well for me.
Were there any other people, or besides the classes, anything else that influences your art?
Well, a lot of my ideas come from other things. So as an example, I have this plate right here that's got the stripes in it.
Yeah, get it a little closer so we can have a look at it.
So this plate actually was designed by a piece of art at Homegrown Restaurant here in town. They had this fish on the wall that was wooden, but it had the sort of muted blues and greens that made up, stripes that made up the fish. And I kept looking at it thinking, that would make an awesome piece of glass.
Wow, I know the piece you're talking about.
Yeah, so I went home and started playing around with strips of glass, and then that's how I came up with that plate.
So so the process itself, does it take a while to actually create? How, I mean, like, let's say for instance, how long did it actually take you to create that tray?
Oh, so probably cutting the pieces maybe took me about 2 hours or whatever to get them all to, be flat and lined up. You kind of have to grind them and stuff. What surprises a lot of people is a kiln cycle takes almost a full 24 hours. So the actual heating process is more around 11 hours, but then you can't open and peek in the kiln or you'll crack your glass until it reaches room temperature. And so it takes a long time for the kiln to cool down from about 700 degrees down to room temperature.
Wow.
So then you make your piece flat and then you put it in a mold and you have to refire it. But sometimes after that first one, it's not quite what you want. And so you'll kind of grind it and make it, look better. So sometimes it's 3 or 4 firings, not just the typical 2.
So do you think that when you see things, like the fish, the fish over at Homegrown, is this where you kind of get your creativity? Does it come from other areas? Is it just maybe something you look at and go like, oh, I could do that?
Yeah, so a lot of times it comes from that. Sometimes it comes from the glass artist in general is a very, they like to help people a lot. So on Facebook, there's like an example, a group, Fused Glass Fanatics, that has, I don't know, 15, 16,000 people. And nobody usually tries to hide anything. They're always very sharing about, here's how I did this, here's how I did that. And so sometimes you'll see something and think, oh, I wonder if I could do something like that, but change it. And then, sometimes ideas come from other people. Sometimes my ideas come from sort of my technical background where I have an idea and I want to explore something further. So I'll show you one more example. This example here was created because I was curious about the viscosity of glass.
Hmm.
And so some glass melts and changes shape faster and at different temperatures than other glass. So I knew that to be true, in theory, but I wanted to see what would happen. So I made a bowl where you actually, when you slump it upside down like this over a stainless steel mold. And so what happens is a lot of times it'll slump in various places and you can't control it usually. But in this case, I put the blues on the corners to see if I could control the slump because it melts basically, it's a different viscosity than the white, see if it would melt different. And actually it came out perfect, meaning that it basically creased at exactly the same points where the blue are.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that to me was more of a science experiment that I wanted to give it a try and see what would happen. So
Got it.
sometimes my ideas come from sort of, well, what would happen if I did this? And I'll have to admit, they don't all work out.
So do you think that you continue to get your creativity because in terms of wanting to do artwork, some people will do it for a while and then they'll just kind of put it away and let it go and they won't continue with it. Is this sort of what keeps you going at it, or is there something else?
No, I think for me, I like to learn new things and try new things. And so some people you'll see, they'll create a portfolio, you'll look at their portfolio, they're all similar but slightly different. Whereas me, I kind of always say I tend not to do the same thing very often because everything I do, I want to try something else. What if, or how would this work? And sort of that's one of the things that led me to writing a blog a long time ago. I started that at the beginning.
Yeah, now let's talk about that blog because your artwork is you don't blog in necessarily the customary manner, correct?
Yeah, no, a lot of people, they'll put out a piece they finished in a blog and say, look what I made. Whereas for me, it's all about teaching other people, here's all the mistakes I made along the way to getting this success. Because I think a lot of people think, oh, it's, it just sort of, somebody will show me something and, oh, I can do that and it's easy. And then it doesn't work and they get kind of down about it. But the reality of it is that's the challenge of trying to get it right. And so
Right.
I'm just trying to make them understand that before they get started and then help them figure out how not to make the same mistakes I did.
Right. And you have to figure that when you create, I mean, I am sure that, you look at artists and they'll do a painting or a sculpt or something like that. And I am sure that in many cases, artists will basically end up throwing out a lot of what they do to get where they want to be. I mean, what kind of percentage are we talking about in terms of your artwork?
I'd say probably 60% work, 40% don't. And then occasionally the one good thing about glass is that you can refuse it.
Oh,
So
right.
if you want, you can always take a piece of glass, take a hammer to it, and then use pieces of that glass
You
in
could do
something
that.
else. So one of my blog posts was about making, lemonade from the lemons, and so one that I did take a hammer to, and then put all the pieces together and refused, and actually it turned out pretty cool.
So the lessons learned there are from your mistakes. I mean, and that's the way it should be. It should be that when you make errors, you should be able to go, one would hope that you go like, oh yeah, okay, I shouldn't do that next time. Is there one thing in particular that you really kind of had trouble getting over or making work?
Think before I do. Uh,
Ah,
so sometimes I get all into the design process and I might not be thinking quite so well. And an example was that I have this donut mold and you can make a drop vase. So it kind of falls through the mold. So it's got a rim on it. You can put it on a stand. I wanted to put a piece of glass underneath and have it stand on that piece of glass. Didn't really think about the size of the hole and the size of the piece of the glass. And it finished fusing. I went and took it out of the kiln and I can't get it out of the mold. It is stuck in the mold.
oh,
And if I had just thought about it, I would
yeah.
have realized that you can't make that piece of glass on the bottom bigger than that donut hole. But I didn't. And so anyway, that's an example of one of those that, I didn't really think about it. I just got so caught up in, oh, this is fun and I should try this and
Yeah,
do this.
yeah. Right.
Well,
Hence the lesson learned.
exactly.
So all of your creativity, did that happen? I get that did so that really started prior to your arrival in Florence and kind of grew after you got here and after you retired. Is that safe to say?
Yes, yes. It started back when I was in California. I did it when I worked, and I never sold anything. I just sort of had glass all over the house, and if you came to visit, I'd say, take whatever you want.
Yeah.
But when we moved to Florence and we retired, kind of the deal is that I at least have to break even. So find a way to sell so that you can kind of break even. And we
Yep.
got here just as Fra was moving to Old Town from their previous location north of town. And they were
Ah,
looking for artists to sell. And never in a million years did I dream that I would ever be on the board and be president. So I came in and they said, sure, we'd love to sell your stuff.
yeah.
But that quickly became 3 months later, me getting on the board, and about a year later, me being president. So it
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
happened pretty quickly.
Yeah, we're gonna chat about that too. We're talking with Kristin Anderson. You can see her work at the Florence Regional Arts Alliance and also at Backstreet. Is your work at Backstreet as well?
Yes, yes, it
Okay,
is.
Backstreet Galleries. That's here in Florence, and if you're near the Bay Area, also at the Pence Gallery in Davis, California. If you want to get in contact with her, you can do so at idlecreativity.com to see to see the rest of her work. idlecreativity.com. So your shop is at home, correct? So you do all of this at home?
Yes, yes, I do.
When you work, where's your head when you work? That is to say, do you listen to music or do you need to silence or what's it like when you actually create?
Well, before FRA, I would stand at my workshop for, sometimes a couple hours, and I would just move pieces around, start to, sometimes a piece will sit on the workbench for
Yeah,
days
yeah.
because I'm not quite happy. I don't know what to change, so I'm just sort of looking at it, keep coming back to it. Since I've gotten really busy lately, it's been a little bit of a faster process. So it's kind of like, what can I sneak in? And so that piece might stay on the bench a little bit longer than a couple days sometimes now.
Okay.
But usually it is an organic process. It's not a start to finish, sit down in an hour and I'm done. Because sometimes it's just not working out and you have to keep thinking.
Yeah, you have to kind of keep at it. Persistence it is the reoccurring theme that I get from a lot of the artists that I talk to. For those people that really want to create, and we have some real, very, very creative folks in town. And I know you said that was one of the things that kind of drew you to being in Florence was the art community. Anybody that you can think of offhand that whose artwork you admire locally?
Oh, there's many of them. I love watching people work at their craft. But everybody's so different. Some people, especially the painters that like to come in and paint at FRA. Because personally, I would love to paint, but I don't know that that's ever really going to happen. But
Well,
some
you
people,
didn't know fused glass was going to happen either,
that's true. That's true.
right?
And what my goal would be is to be able to paint on glass. There are some
Oh,
wonderful glass artists that are able to actually paint on the glass and make it look absolutely beautiful. So first you have to learn to paint, I think, and then you can figure out how to paint on the glass. I just think that the whole town, it's just amazing. Even visitors who come to Florence are amazed at how many local artists we have and how good they all are.
there's the internet certainly has created a different world for us in
Yes.
terms of art and in terms of the display of art. Um, as a software, engineer and an internet person, um, how do you think the internet has affected the proliferation of art? I mean, is it a good thing, or is it something where you really still need to like be able to stand and look at it or hold it in your hand or something like that?
Oh no, I think it's helped a lot. Like I said, Fuse Glass Fanatics is like, I don't know. I looked, it was like 16,000 people, and everybody's helping everybody else. And so if I have a question, something's not quite working out. Part of my process, if I don't like the finish on a piece of glass, is to sandblast it, and then you refire it so you can kind of fix up the surface. But it wasn't quite working. I was getting streaks, and so I just posted something out there, and within an hour I had about 10 responses that were extremely helpful.
Wow.
So people are just so willing to share and help, and if it weren't for that internet, it would be hard for me to find these people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And in terms of the sale, do you find that you sell a lot of your work online, or is it mostly by folks who actually come in and look at it?
It's both, but for anybody who's interested in selling online, it works really well, but you only get out of it what you put into it. So before I started selling in a gallery, I sold on Etsy, and I sold a
No.
lot on Etsy. But then
Uh-huh.
once I got involved in the gallery, I got very busy, and I don't put a lot out there. I don't put a lot of time out there, and sales went down. So you have to care and feed it. But I think internet sales, can work really well for a lot of people as long as you understand that it does take time and energy, and you have to put care and feeding into it.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you got involved with the Regional Arts Alliance first as an artist to be able to show their work. You became board president, how did you actually get going there? Outside. I mean, how did you actually get going as a participant on the board?
They had somebody who left the board. And so then Harlan Springer, who was the president at the time, asked me if I would fill that position. And then Harlan, a year later, termed out, meaning that he had served on the board for as long as he could based on the bylaws.
Oh, I see.
So then they needed to elect a new board president,
Yep.
and I became that board president. And at first I'm like, but actually I've loved every minute of it. I love all the people. I love trying to make FRA a community of artists, of people that really want to be here together, share, and kind of be part of a family. But I've also loved learning about nonprofits. I mean, it's so different than the corporate world.
Oh, yeah.
And so every day there's something new that comes up that, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. And so, to me, I like challenges. And so, yeah, like I said, every day's a new challenge.
And it appeals to your nature in terms of that. Yeah, it does seem to appeal to your nature, and you do have lots of energy. I speak from experience in terms of your work on the board. And how else do you think that the Arts Alliance is actually reaching out not only to artists, but to the community at large?
Well, we try and do a lot of different activities with the community. Some of them are art festivals from the past, but an example of a new one is one of our members had this idea that since we're in lockdown sort of mode right now, that the retirement homes, don't have a lot of human touch and people visiting. And so could we do something for them? So we've asked the artists to actually design cards, either put a photo on them or draw on them or whatever they'd like to do. I'm actually making little fused glass things to put on top of them.
Oh.
And then we're sending them, or they've asked not to go through US mail, but we're giving them the actual cards so that the residents get some human touch. There's little notes in all of them. They can, put it on their wall, put it on their nightstand, whatever. But know that there's people who care about them.
Wow. That's really nice. And also you're involved with the schools as well, correct? I mean, well, when school was in session, is that curtailed, or are we still doing that kind of thing?
We're investigating it. We're working very closely with the principal of the elementary school right now, Michael Harkle Road, to figure out, we actually have a grant to do an artist in residence program, and we're trying to figure out how we can do that. So I've been working over the last 2 years, I would say, very closely with Lane Arts Council in Eugene. And they have a wealth of knowledge of how to do various things. And they're trying to put together some programs right now for some online art classes. So I'm investigating if maybe we can, because we can't put an artist in residence in the school this fall, maybe we could do something to transition the grant so that we can make use of these online classes and put the money toward that program instead.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether or not the grant committee or those people who actually fund the grants are willing to, are amenable to doing that given the situation. It would be nice to see that, to have that kind of flexibility to be able to shift from one grant to another type. So,
in general, I believe that they typically are. So I'm also part of working with Lane Arts Council. We do these art convenings. And this afternoon's convening is basically we invite artists and businesses that are related to art to come together to talk about a topic. So we've talked about reopening, and so today's is actually a conversation with funders, so funders of grants. But in preparation for the convenings, we've already had our own discussions with some of these funders. In general, they're very open to modifying things and trying to accommodate the new rules because they realize that most people wouldn't be able to accomplish. Many of these grants are, for concerts or museums, where people can't come together anymore, and so they want to help make the organization successful. So how can they work with you to help you then use this money to actually do something in today's environment?
Got it. Okay, so they are amenable to being, they're flexible.
Yes.
They are
very flexible right now.
Yeah. And your involvement with Backstreet Gallery, is that purely as an artist, or do you also do some work with them?
Well, Backstreet Gallery is different from FRA. FRA is a nonprofit organization where we do have a gallery, artists can sell, but we do a lot of other things for the community.
Right.
Backstreet is a co-op. So there's about 20 plus artists and we all own the business and we have to work to kind of make it happen. So at Backstreet, I do two different things. One is I do their marketing, and then second, I'm the treasurer there, which has been another interesting learning experience. But we each have our roles, and so that's also been interesting, learning how to maintain an art business. I did not start it. These wonderful people started it 15 years ago
Yeah.
and created a wonderful business. So I've kind of come into it, later, and just tried to kind of keep going what they've already started. But it's
Yeah.
been fun.
And I think it's worth mentioning too that you, like you said, the difference in terms of one being a nonprofit and the other being for profit, but that the Arts Alliance is also a teaching center where classes are held, folks get together to talk about art. There's also poetry. What other types of teaching, sort of instructional stuff goes on there?
Well, you mentioned the literary art. So we do quite a few things for that. So we have like an open poetry night, open mic, where they come in and they sit in a circle and they can recite their poems. We've also done writing workshops, which are interesting because sometimes one of the assignments will be to write something about a piece of art they like on the wall.
Mm.
So they're trying to kind of marry the art that's, in the gallery with what they're doing for writing. We also have literary salons where they try and replicate kind of the things that used to happen in the old days, where you get together, people share their literary works, and they just, they kind of have wine and food, and they just sort of enjoy being together.
Yeah.
And then as far as, art, we've done jewelry classes, we've done painting classes, we've done leather classes where we invited Tandy Leather from Eugene to come over and teach a class. So just a wide variety to felting classes, to give people the opportunity to try something new that they've never done, to see if they like it and maybe kind of create a new hobby.
Wow. Yeah. So there are many choices. That was one of the things that was also attractive to me when we first came here was was the amount of art that was done in this location, and how large that community was. It was very impressive for a quote unquote smaller town. And the the Old Town area, not, including FRA and also including Backstreet, there are multiple other galleries along Bay Street for people to choose from. Let me ask you this. How do you feel about where you're at in this relatively new stage of your life?
Interesting question. So right now I'm really happy. I enjoy all the different challenges I have, and I keep trying to figure out, I term out, meaning that I have one more year that I could be part of FRA's board,
Right.
and then I myself can no longer be part of the board. And I do keep trying to figure out then what would my role be, since I enjoy being a part of the community and a part of the art part of the community specifically. And I do think that there's, lots of opportunities. As an example, I've really enjoyed learning the challenges, because they're not always easy, of writing grants to try and get FRA money.
Yep.
And there's so many things that people can do for FRA, as an example, that are not on the board. We rely heavily on all of our volunteers, and each person can have a contributing role. They absolutely do not need to be part of the FRA board to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that maybe I could, take on the role of grant writing for FRA. But there's lots of other little areas that I see that I can help out as well. So I have, for me, I think I will just continue to be part of the art scene, and part of working with the schools and the elderly, because I love to do that as well. I just, in general, my whole background, even as an engineer, my roles were those of helping people. And so that's what I enjoy.
Wow, what a great way to wrap up this session and edition of Featured Artist. Kristin Anderson, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.